Coming up, Black History Month is more than just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. It's about American citizens making a difference in their communities. Activate Live starts now.
Activate your voice. Activa tu voz. Activate it now.
Speak up. Speak out. Get involved. Get involved.
Engage-toi.
Take action.
Aktiviere deine Stimme.
We're union and we're proud.
Welcome to Activate Live. I'm Tanya Hutchins, coming to you from Machinists Union headquarters in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. We're going to talk to you about Black history, Black labor history, and some names you may not know. But first, Alstom USA is starting testing of its new high-speed Acela trains. These trains are proudly made by machinists in Hornell, New York. Now, these union members, this test will last 9 months and are reportedly due to roll out next year. So we're looking forward to these trains. International President Bob Martinez wrote a letter to Congress blasting a presidential memo calling for Defense Department employees to lose their union rights. The letter states, federal law grants federal employees collective bargaining rights under the law, and a signature on a memo should not be able to wipe these statutory rights away. The letter goes on to say that the Machinists Union has serious concerns about the appropriateness of this memo and ask you to seek answers on why this action was necessary. Well, many labor activists are celebrating Black Labor Week in Gary, Indiana. I can't talk this week. Organizers say the 5 days of action are meant to inspire, energize, and build a positive structure within the Black community. Union members are discussing community service, education, and overall empowerment. It's part of Black History Month, which reminds Americans about the achievements and contributions of Blacks in the United States. It started as Negro History Week in 1926 and officially became Black History Month in 1976. The National Archives keeps records of American labor history, but sifting through those records to find Black labor history can be a challenge. In the Archives Prologue magazine online, the agency notes that Black Americans participated in labor actions since before the Civil War. In 1835, Black caulkers at the Washington Navy Yard went on strike. After the war, Black workers had to make the transition to freedom and a new labor system. Well, the National Archives contains millions of documents about that transition, along with information about how Black workers fared during the Great Depression and World War II. Throughout that history, the civil rights movement has been tied to the labor movement and vice versa. Our guest today is no stranger to organized labor. Allison Davis is a television executive and one of the founders of the National Association of Black Journalists, also known as NABJ. Thanks for joining us, Allison.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Now, you have a tie through your family to labor history, but what is your earliest memory of the civil rights movement?
My earliest memory of the civil rights movement came through my dad. My dad was with the AFL-CIO during the height of the civil rights movement. He started as in the Transport Workers Union while going to Columbia University. And then after he graduated, he went to become on the executive committee of the Transport Workers Union, and then was brought to Washington, where he was very much involved in civil rights as the assistant director of the Civil Rights Department for the AFL-CIO. And so we knew the kind of work that he was doing in the South particularly, but I'll be honest with you, Tanya, we really, my father would come home and we'd ask him to take us to McDonald's or ask us to take us to Carvel's. Not really as involved and in terms of an understanding in terms of what he was going through every week. So
he was just dad.
He was just dad. Exactly. That's exactly who he was. And then occasionally, we would talk about what we were learning in school about the civil rights movement. And my father would say, well, that's not exactly right because I was just with Dr. King, or I was just with Ralph Abernathy, or I was just with, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm seeing you're showing a picture that we got just a few years ago. And I, again, didn't know much about it, but you can see um, Martin Luther King in the center. My father is the head above Dr. King's. They're coming out of the Brown AME Church in Selma, about to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And if you remember, after Bloody Sunday, it was organized labor that came down to Selma, that prayed with King and began that march the second time after Bloody Sunday. My father, by the way, is talking to a gentleman that many labor folks may know. That's Walter Reuther. And the man that's to his right is Tom Donahue, who later became the president of the AFL-CIO. This extremely iconic picture says to me that without labor, there probably would not have been civil rights bills, obviously voting rights bills. Labor was so instrumental, and it's so important that we remember that.
And I know right now we are trying to make sure that people know that human rights, our civil rights, our labor rights, even with young people. Your dad was involved with apprenticeships, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. I'm always shocked to find out how much he was involved in his, short years. My father died at age 64. And so, but what he accomplished, not only in apprenticeships, not only in education. I just found something this morning of him talking about AFL-CIO's position about integrating schools, and particularly integrating schools through busing, which the AFL-CIO was very much for, because they saw no other remedy other than busing, since it was harder to make sure that there was housing integration. So I am just so very shocked. My father was also on the executive board of the A. Philip Randolph Institute and was very good friends with Bayard Rustin. And we all know Bayard Rustin was the architect behind the March on Washington. And so I did get, when my father died, Mr. Rustin was at the funeral, and he began to recount, the stories that we had not heard about our dad.
How does that make you feel to find out something through stories, through other people, or just discovering something like you told me you discovered some testimony recently? How does that make you feel, discovering?
I will tell you that this morning it brought tears to my eyes because it's stuff that I didn't know. I have two children. They are in their 20s, late 20s and early 30s. And what a legacy they have. And so I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that I can share that legacy with them, and hopefully they will share it with their children as well. I am immensely proud of my dad, and I'm immensely proud of all he accomplished, and again, the legacy he's left for all of us.
I live in Northeast DC, not even 15 minutes from the part of Silver Spring, Maryland called Hillendale. And that's where the George Meany Center for Labor Studies, which later became the National Labor College, is. Your dad helped to found that, didn't he?
He did the feasibility study as the director of education for the AFL-CIO, and I never forget when the George Meany Labor Studies Center opened. And will never forget it, primarily because I had come in from Boston, grabbed a cab because I was running late, and the cab actually broke down on one of those highways. But I made it just as they were beginning to dedicate it. So it was clearly one of his most amazing and proudest achievements.
Now, Allison, you were one of the founding members of the National Association of Black Journalists. I'm also a member. We refer to it as NABJ. When you founded this organization in 1975, what was it like back then, as a woman, as a Black woman working in journalism?
Interestingly enough, I was 22 years old. I was working at WBZ in Boston. My job was a writer-producer. In fact, I had to ask my boss whether or not I could take one day off so I could march and graduate from college. My parents insisted upon seeing me go across that stage. But in December of 1975, I happened to be in Washington. My parents lived in Silver Spring. And I went to an event. It was the Black Elected Officials event in Wardman Plaza or Sheraton Hotel. I can't even remember the hotel in DC. And somebody said, before we go to this reception, let's head to, there's a meeting. And I said, okay. And I ended up going to the meeting, and there were several people there I recognized by name, did not know by face. And the truth of the matter is that I was an obnoxious kid who was 22 years old and knew Robert's Rules of Order and knew that it was time for them to get down to business. And I said to the chairman at that time, which is Chuck Stone, and who was our first president, I said, Mr. Chairman, point of order. And he said, who are you? And I said, my name is Allison Davis. I'm from WBZ TV. And he said, what's your point? And I made whatever my point was. And he said, you know Robert's Rules? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you are now our parliamentarian. And I said, of what? And he said, what are we calling ourselves? And everybody said, what? Didn't we say it was the National Association of Black Journalists? And the rest, as they say, is history.
That is incredible. 44 people has turned into an organization of about 3,000. How do you feel about the growth?
4,100, I just found out. 4,100. Really? Yes.
That is amazing.
Yes.
That is amazing. Well, we thank you for starting the organization. I met you last week at the NABJ Basics Boot Camp, which was in Dallas, Texas. And there were workshops like Negotiating 101. I was on a panel for a workshop called Let's Talk Money. You know, schools don't really teach labor anymore. How can we change that?
You know, I think to a certain extent, you know, and I probably won't be so popular on this show, but it's up to labor. Labor has to embrace all that it is and all that it was. And you know, it's something that sometimes I get a little perturbed at organized labor of my family business, because we are not making sure, and obviously through programs like this is fabulous, but we need more. We need more. My father fought very hard to make sure that labor was taught in schools, and I'm not sure how much of that is happening anymore. We have to begin to not spend a week or a day or a month, but really integrate, you know, the importance of labor and labor unions in, you know, in programs. And we don't do that. And I think labor has a responsibility to fight for these opportunities to be able to really to do this in our schools. You know, I think about my life. You know, there were certain things that we could not do, you know, and very quickly, we were not allowed to own a foreign car. We were not allowed, my mother never could get a mink coat because my father said, my salary is off the backs of working men and women. There were so many things that, you know, we had to do as a family because my father felt very, very strongly about the place that labor had in this country. And he also felt very strongly that this is what we should be learning in school, and this is what we should be learning in history within you know, our history classes. And so I think it's up to labor. I gave you that long, passionate speech to say it's up to labor.
Well, I'm very proud that Cornell University is still working on it. We have SUNY Empire State College, and we even have Eastern Gateway Community College that is helping us to offer free college. My hope is still there. But in terms of journalism, we have labor reporters that are disappearing. What is your message to journalists that are covering workers' issues?
I think that now this is the best time, particularly under our present government, because the economic issues will affect particularly labor and the working person first. And I don't think that folks are listening and understanding what the economic situation is. I heard some sobering things today on one of the talk shows, and you hear this every day on a talk show, that it ain't as good as you think it is. And I think it's important, particularly this year in 2020, as we begin to look to vote. I think it's extremely important that we understand the impact that the economics will have on the hard, folks who do the real work in this country.
I totally agree with you, Allison. Before you go, you are now working for Arts Horizon. Tell us a little bit about that nonprofit.
I work for a wonderful, wonderful nonprofit that actually puts art and arts education in schools, senior centers, after-school programs. As you know, it's very, very hard to be creative if you don't have that arts background. And so we are talking about integrating arts in traditional subjects, but to make sure that that schools have the various disciplines in arts. And so we have hundreds of teaching artists that are in public schools, particularly in New York and New Jersey. We have assembly programs that are thematic and that are curriculum based. So we, anti-bullying, but it's done in a way that kids can digest it and understand the impact of some of their actions through the arts. So it's a 41-year-old organization. We're very proud of what we do. I have I transitioned into nonprofit because I had the opportunity to do so. So I'm delighted. I've got a great staff, and we're doing what we can do to make sure that the arts are not only introduced in schools, but stay and that have the sustainability so schools can continue to integrate arts into their regular school programming.
Very important work, and arts need to be in every school. I almost forgot, we were talking about your dad so much. You were a union member too. When did you first join a union?
I joined the union in 1975. I was an AFTRA before it became AFTRA-SAG. And then when I went to the network, I was at NBC News for many years. I joined NABJ, then became NABJ CWA. I was out on strike, I guess probably in the late 80s, early 90s. When I joined the union in 1975, it was the proudest day of my father's life. And I will tell you that he was equally as proud of when I joined NABJ as well. So yeah, I spent a good 30 years in union.
Well, Allison, I could talk to you forever. You have so many stories.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
So what do you think about what you've seen and heard so far? Join the conversation right here on this video. Activate your voice using live chat on YouTube, comments on Facebook, or by replying to this video on Twitter, even during the replay. Well, seeing how young people are involved in the labor movement is inspiring. One of the most active groups is from the A. Philip Randolph Institute, which is named after the civil rights and labor leader. And there he is, A. Philip Randolph. There's the website, apri.org. Now, he once said, and we have a quote here, "Justice is never given, it is exacted, and the struggle must be continuous, for freedom is never a final act, but a continuing, evolving process to higher and higher levels of human, social, economic, political, and religious relationship." Joining us now from Indiana is APRI Youth Coordinator Jada Jenkins-Curtis. Thanks so much for joining us, Jada.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Now, you are a youth coordinator with APRI, and you're in Gary, Indiana now. Let us know why you're there.
Okay, so yes, here in Gary, Indiana, we are here for Black Labor Week, which is ran by Ephraim Jenkins, EJ. He is a steel worker. It is Wednesday. We've been here since about Sunday, and every day we have done an active community service within the area. So we have been really getting into these communities and trying to make a difference, a tangible difference that people will actually be able to notice. So on Monday, we went to the Veterans Village and served breakfast. Yesterday, we went to a bunch of different schools, middle schools and high schools, taught about voting and the importance of it. We talked to youth between the sixth grade all the way up to ninth grade, I believe, was the group I was in. I did sixth to ninth grade. And we went to a couple of different schools, talked about those different things. And I really appreciate moments like that. It's always a learning opportunity to be able to teach some of these youth what's not being taught in the textbooks. Often, I think you mentioned it earlier, Philip Randolph isn't always mentioned in the textbook. So coming to things like Black Labor Week, where we can raise awareness to our roots and make a difference within the community so that these youth really know what power that they have and that they're given is really great.
Now, I've been following you on Instagram, and you are all over the country. What
Yeah.
is the role of youth at APRI?
They have such a big role. I'm so proud of them. Essentially, let's start with this. APRI has 125 chapters nationwide. That does not include the youth chapters. We're constantly growing. We have so many. The role right now, well, I know my role right now is we're starting a bunch of different collegiate chapters. Right now, we have a bunch of chapters in FAMU, Savannah State, Morgan State. And also essentially what these youth are doing is getting into their communities. It's an election year, so they're going to be very active. You're going to see a lot of them canvassing and getting into their communities, registering people to vote so that we can make the turnout that we need to be the change that we want to see. So it's just really great, and it's a great opportunity. And I love how energized and excited they are for this. They love getting into the community. And even chapters that aren't collegiate, we have, a part with the adult chapters are the youth that aren't at college level yet. And I remember in 2016 when I first started working with APRI and I went out to go canvassing and stuff like that with some North Carolina chapters, we had 7-year-olds out there canvassing with us.
Wow.
And registering people to vote, doing phone banking and stuff like that. They hold such an important place in this election, whether they realize it or not. But what I love is that I really do think that they're actually starting to realize that, and they're taking advantage of the resources and the powers that they're using.
What are you hearing in terms of feedback about them getting involved in APRI?
I hear a lot of different things, actually. I hear a lot, and I really appreciate it. There are a couple of things that I really like to hear is when they come to we have a national education conference every year. When they come to the conference, I love hearing them say, my favorite part was, yeah, they like to network and meet new people, but their favorite part was the sessions and what they learn within that. I really do feel like APRI makes a difference within these youth's lives because we give them opportunities that they might not have known how to seek out on their own. So they love that and they take advantage of that. I think that's one of the main things that I hear. Another thing is just that because we are so active and because we have so many youth, last year, we set a record. We had 167 youth at our conference last year in Bloomington, Minnesota. It was our 50th anniversary. And they all enjoyed themselves so much while learning. Being able to bridge that gap between the adults and the youth is another thing that they also appreciate, because what a lot of people don't tend to realize is that we need them just as much as they need us. And as long as we both try, we make it happen. And that's what they really love. They really love getting involved with everybody, anything they can put their hands on.
I bet in the next year you will surpass 200 young people involved.
That's the goal. I'm always striving to grow within the community. There's power in numbers. And that's one thing. That's actually our theme for this year's conference for the youth, is creating community. And that's the goal, essentially. I'm working really hard to formulate a conference that will really mock what a real community looks like when they stand together, so that when they go back home to their own communities where they live, they can reach one, teach one, and do what they need to do to make everything happen.
Now, remind everybody where the conference is and when it is.
Okay, so the conference this year, it is in Baltimore, Maryland. It is August 12th through the 16th. That is a Wednesday to a Sunday.
Okay, so they have a few months' notice to get out there.
Yes. Yep. The youth applications come out next Friday, actually.
Okay, we have a comment already, Jada, from Barry Reed. He says, awesome work, Jada. So you're getting props.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Now, where are you headed next?
Oh, that's a really great question. I believe our next trip, if I'm not mistaken, I know we have to go back down to Savannah State. We're setting up fundraisers. One thing that I'm doing with the conference this year, I'm making it a point to go to every single youth chapter that we have so that they can feel like there is a connection, because I work in the national office in DC. And so it's really important to me that those youth know that they have that connection to the national office as a leader, as a mentor, and to guide them in the right direction and to help them out and be the support that they need. So next, I believe we're going to Savannah, and then next month we have to go to Seattle, I think it is.
Now,
That's next one.
My old stomping grounds, even though it's not my alma mater, is Ohio State. So don't forget about Ohio.
Oh, no, trust me, we won't. We have a couple adult chapters and youth chapters in Ohio, actually.
Great.
So it's really great.
Excellent. So going into this year's election, I know you're getting out the vote. How much do you hope that the issues that affect young people are heard? I mean, really making their voices heard during this 2020 election?
I think it's more than a hope on how I feel. I feel like hoping is a good thing to do, but at the end of the day, it's what we need. Some people don't realize that what goes on in office might not directly affect you, but it could directly affect somebody else. And so with these youth growing up, a lot of what is that? I saw a post the other day, actually, that was saying that the population of millennials have actually surpassed the baby boomers at this point. So right now we are in high demand. And if we want to see certain things happen, we need to be able to understand and comprehend what's going on, which is what we do, is doing a lot of voter education. I hope and I will make happen that every youth that I know of is going to get out to the polls so that their voice is heard, so that they feel like their voice is heard, so that they know it is heard.
Anything else you'd like to mention, Jada?
Oh man, I've already mentioned the conference. Stay tuned. Follow us on our Instagram page. It's _APRI Youth 65. We're trying to take over. We're trying to make sure that everything happens. There's just so much in store. Like there's just a lot. You're just gonna have to follow along.
Well, you will take over because you all are the next generation, so it will happen. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Jada.
Thank you.
Well, you too can join the conversation. Make your voices heard right here on this video, no matter which platform you are watching. We would love to hear what you think. Here's a look back now at this week in labor history. On February 16th, 2008, Reverend James Orange passed away. He's pictured here on the right. The AFL-CIO called him one of the country's greatest advocates for social justice. He was a key field organizer for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and joined Martin Luther King in Birmingham, Alabama, where he organized demonstrations of school children who were fire-hosed and attacked by police dogs. Orange later joined the AFL-CIO and became a union organizer. And on February 19th, 1942, the Tuskegee Airmen became the first black flying unit in the U.S. military. We salute them a week before Black History Month officially comes to a close. Well, if you are a member of the Machinists Union, one of the benefits of your union membership is the Wimpesinger Education and Technology Center in Hollywood, Maryland. Here are some deadlines to keep in mind. It's time to register for the Human Rights Program. That registration has been extended to March 2nd. That's the deadline. The Financial Officers Program deadline is March 23rd. If you'd like to attend the Retirees Assistance Program, get your application in by April 6th. Basic Communicators is due April 10th, and the Women's Advanced Program is due April 13th. Check the website, wimpesinger.iamaw.org. Here's a list of our upcoming state council meetings. February 22nd, the Nebraska State Council meets in Lincoln. February 29th to March 1st, the Iowa State Council meets in Aluna. March 2nd to the 4th, the Washington State Council meets in Olympia. And the Arizona State Council meets in Tucson, March 28th. So we have a lot. We hope you got all that. You marked those down. We always like to give you all of the dates of what's coming up in our union and in the labor movement as a whole. Support your union siblings. Spread the word about this video to your local or district page, even your territory page. And thanks to all of you who already do. We'll see you next Wednesday when we will speak with the Union Sportsmen's Alliance, and we will also speak to Georgia State University. The libraries there archive all of the Machinist Union's information, communications. It's really fascinating to look at. So we'll see you next Wednesday.